Let's dive into a moment that completely reshaped the map of East Asia. In 1910, a rapidly rising Japan annexed Korea. Now, this was not some sudden move. No, it was the final step in a long game, the result of a nation's incredible transformation, its fierce ambition, and a series of calculated moves that have consequences we still feel to this day.
So you have to ask, why? Why did this happen? How did a modernizing Japan, a country seemingly focused on its own incredible internal growth, end up taking over the entire Korean peninsula? That is the central question we are going to unpack right here.
And to get to the bottom of it, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at how Japan transformed itself into a new power. Then, we're going to decode the 3 key drivers behind its need to expand. After that, we'll trace the step-by-step path to conquest, look at the 1910 annexation itself, and then, finally, we'll grapple with its very complicated legacy.
Okay, so to really get what happened in 1910, our story has to begin a few decades earlier. It all kicks off during a period that completely remade Japan from the ground up, the Meiji Restoration.
This was a massive national project. I mean, top to bottom. The goal? To turn Japan from a feudal, isolated society into a modern industrial powerhouse that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the Western empires. But here's the crucial part. This internal change was always linked to an external expansionist agenda. Just look at how these goals fit together. It's like a perfect puzzle. A stronger economy and military? Well, that needs tons of resources. A centralized government? That lets you make big, bold moves. And it all pointed in one unmistakable direction. A policy of expansion to feed the engine of this new Japan.
All right, so Japan had the muscle and the mindset for expansion. But what was it that pushed them so specifically toward Korea? What were the deep-down motives? Well, we can actually break it down into 3 core drivers.
You can pretty much boil it all down to these 3 incredibly powerful forces. There was strategic fear, there was economic hunger, and there was a whole lot of national pride. So let's dig into each one.
For Japan's leaders, geography was everything. I mean, look at a map from their point of view. They saw Korea as a potential highway for any continental power that wanted to invade Japan. So for them, controlling Korea wasn't just about gaining territory, it was about building a critical defensive wall.
This quote, wow, it just perfectly captures the intensity of that fear. If another big imperial power, like Russia or China, controlled that dagger, Japan felt its very existence was at risk. Securing Korea wasn't just about expansion. In their minds, it was about survival.
Next up, you've got the economic engine. A modern industrial economy needs fuel, right? It needs raw materials to build things and markets to sell them. And Japan, being a resource-poor island nation, was absolutely desperate for both.
And this chart here just lays it all out. Korea was seen as a vital breadbasket, a source for key industrial minerals, and of course, labor. It wasn't just a nice-to-have. It was seen as an essential piece of the puzzle for Japan's continued economic growth and stability.
And the third driver? Well, that one was all about ideology. Back in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, what was the ultimate status symbol for a world power? It was having an empire. For this newly modernizing Japan, building an empire wasn't just a strategic or economic move. It felt like their national destiny. It was a matter of pride.
So you've got these 3 powerful forces, strategic fear, economic hunger, and national pride, all pushing Japan forward. Let's look at how that ambition actually turned into action. What were the steps they took?
This timeline really shows a clear and calculated escalation over just 15 years. First, Japan defeats China, the old power in the region. Then, a decade later, it stuns the world and defeats Russia, a major European empire. Those victories gave Japan the leverage to impose the Yulza Treaty, which basically stripped Korea of its foreign policy powers and made it a protectorate. From there, full formal annexation was the final step. And those military victories did way more than just give Japan the power to control Korea. They were like rocket fuel for that nationalistic fire we were talking about. Every win reinforced this belief that Japan was destined to lead Asia, making more expansions seem not just possible, but completely natural. And all of this leads us right to the final act in 1910. After years of tightening its grip and facing more and more Korean resistance to its influence, Japan basically decided it was time to end any pretense of Korean independence. So on August 29, 1910, this treaty was signed. But let's be clear, this wasn't some negotiation between equals. It was the endpoint of years of pressure and military dominance. With the stroke of a pen, the Korean Empire officially ceased to exist as an independent country.
The results were immediate, and they were absolute. Korea's sovereignty? Gone. Overnight. Japan's control was now total. And this single act kicked off 35 years of a very harsh colonial rule that would change the Korean peninsula in some truly profound and painful ways.
So finally, let's step back and think about the legacy of this event. How is it sold to the world at the time? And what does it all mean for us today? Because this is where the story gets even more tangled.
At the time, Japan presented this as a modernizing mission. They talked about this grand vision of an economically integrated Asia, led by Japan supposedly for the benefit of everyone. That justification, though, stands in really stark contrast to the actual reality of the colonial period that followed.
And that leaves us with a final, really big question. The story of Japan and Korea is so much more than just history, it's a powerful case study. When a nation rises in power, how does it choose to define its relationship with its neighbors? It's a question that echoes throughout history, and you know what? It remains just as relevant today as it was over a century ago